It's James Prigioni, coming to you live from Jersey. It's a beautiful day today, but the temperatures are quickly dropping. Tonight, it's supposed to get to 21 degrees Fahrenheit. So today, I'm gonna go through and winterize the garden. Figured I'd bring you guys along. Let's go. If you've seen my videos, you notice that I rarely call the food forest a garden. Rather, I choose to call it a system or a design. I do this on purpose because this isn't your average garden. This is a set of connected parts forming a complex whole. I believe the food forest has become its own ecosystem, which is simply a community of organisms and their physical environment. That's why this works so well. It's become its own ecosystem. And you can do this too. If you have a forest growing locally to you, naturally, then you can do the same thing I'm doing. This system is modeled after a natural forest, but designed for my personal preferences. Design is the key word here. You gotta get it, design. Nature is the ultimate teacher, and a natural forest is one of the most productive systems. So that's why we model it and create a food forest. So when we're winterizing the food forest, we'll just mimic and model what nature does for guidance. In fall, deciduous forests drop all their leaves to the ground, just like this. And that covers the ground with a thick organic mulch layer consisting of leaves, twigs, and different branches. So what I do is I mimic that, but I don't put down just leaves and stuff. I choose to use wood chips. Why? Because your food forest is a community of living organisms, some of them being worms and microorganisms and even funguses. These living organisms have different requirements regarding temperature and how much water they need in order to survive and thrive. And it just so happens that an organic matter mulch, your natural leaf drop, is exactly what they need and the perfect environment for them. This mulch will form an insulation and allow all those living organisms to be at work all winter for you, forming great, beautiful soil. Because you provided the perfect environment, these organisms will become more and more active. This activity, even on a microbiological scale, has a byproduct of heat due to all the movement. This heat is then kept insulated by the mulch, and I believe helps to raise the overall temperature of the soil. This insulation will not only benefit your soil, but your perennial plants and your fruit trees. One of the reasons for that is their roots are able to grow later into the fall and start growing earlier in the spring. As Tux just enjoyed a carrot right there. He always loves digging his stuff up. Having this mulch down will also help to maintain consistent temperature in the soil, avoiding any strong fluctuations that could cause stress to your roots. Paul Gauci said it, and I noticed it to be true, that the modern farms, the industrial farms, in the winter, everything dies, everything freezes. But in the forest, in the natural forest, and I'm seeing it in here, nothing dies in the winter. Things might frost a little bit, but I've got the ground insulated. This natural system lives and grows all year long. Typical farmers fertilize in the spring, but not us. We follow nature and what it does. So when we want to come in and put our natural mulch fertilizer down in the fall, and this is all natural. We don't want to use any chemicals or anything. That'll kill the life in the soil. Our main focus is to build the life in the soil. That's what's going to create the beautiful soil structure. If you wanted to put some manure or compost down, this would be the ideal time to do that. And for compost, I suggest putting it down first underneath the wood chips. And it's really going to depend what you have down already. If you have about 2 inches of wood chips, kind of like what I have here left, then you only need about 2 inches of compost. Then come with about 2 more inches of wood chips. It's nice to have that wood chips over top of the compost to, again, help insulate everything better, because the wood chips really are good at locking in moisture and locking in the heat. If you want to use manure, I suggest doing something a little different. If you don't have any wood chips down, put about 3 inches of wood chips down first, then lay your manure down. Then come back with about 3 or 4 more inches of wood chips. That'll work well for an annual garden or even some young fruit trees. It'll really help keep the weeds down. And the reason you don't want to put the manure down first is that'll be too hot for the young plants. The wood chips will help to kind of filter the manure and dissipate the heat. This way you won't burn your young plants, and when it rains, all that nutrition from the manure will seep down. I know I've said it before, but it's so important and so key, especially when you're doing no-till gardening. You never want to mix. Everything is done in layers. Just like in nature, when the leaves drop, every fall it's done in layer after layer. There's no mixing. Mixing the soil together with these different kind of mulches and stuff is where you can get a nitrogen tie-up, or what we call a soil stomach ache. So laying this organic matter mulch down, this form of fertilizer, in the fall is perfect because you've got winter, which here is the rainy season. You've got all season that rain, that snow to come through, like I said, to seep in and allow all that nutrition to go down, because that's how gravity works. And that's why I don't have my chickens in the food forest, because they just scratch too much. They're constantly mixing everything up, and that's really what I don't want. In this section right here, you can see the chickens came through at one point when I let them in here. They scratched everything up. As a result of the scratching, I had all these weeds come through. In the other locations where they didn't scratch, you don't see any weeds coming through. And what they did was go down, dig past some of the wood chips, and got to that soil level, just releasing all those open weed seeds. You might think, yeah, but that's what a chicken does naturally, and shouldn't it be in the food forest? Maybe, but only as a temporary disturbance. Joel Salatin talks about it. He uses pigs through his forest, just temporarily runs them through, and they mix up the soil. They eat different kind of things, which gives them a better polyculture of different plants and different organisms at the soil level. So having the chickens in here actually created weeds and created more work for me. But I can use them to my advantage if I just design the system correctly. How much mulch you put down will depend on a few factors. One of them is whether or not you want plants to self-seed. Some people think that you can't have plants self-seeding in wood chips, and that's just not true. You just have to manipulate the system a little bit to work for you. Right here, we've got a cilantro plant. I didn't plant this, it came up all on its own. And you can notice one of the reasons it came up is because the wood chip layer below it is really thin, maybe about only an inch or two. So if you want your plants to self-seed, like the cilantro did, you have to make sure that your wood chips aren't too thick. You can do one of two things. Either you could have your wood chips break down if it was a number of years, like happened in this situation, or you can go to a plant that you want to self-seed while it still has the seeds on it, which I'll show you, and pull back the wood chips until they're only about 1 or 2 inches thick, right at the end of the fall going into the winter. Right here to the right of me is a tomato that came up on its own. It was self-seeded, and in this location I did the same thing. I just didn't come through in the fall and put more wood chips down. I actually came through after the plant was grown in the spring, after it sprouted and self-seeded, then I came through and put the wood chips around the base of it. Because if you put those wood chips down in the fall, it's just going to be too thick for any seeds to drop and come through. So if I wanted this location here and I wanted it to self-seed again, what I would do, if I had thick wood chips, which I don't really right here, I would come through and I would just pull back some of these wood chips until they were only about 2 inches or so. And you can see, look at all the fungus in here. Look how well they're holding the moisture in, creating a perfect environment for life. So as you can see, something like this, if a seed dropped, it would grow well. And if you want to, right before the spring and everything starts shooting up, you could come through and add just a little compost over the top of it to make sure those seeds are covered and then they come through. Whether or not you want to let your plants self-seed, that's up to you. I suggest it if you have a really large area, but for someone like me, I have such a small space, I want to choose the particular varieties that I want, place them in the locations that I want. So sometimes I'll let a few things just come up naturally if they're under a tree or something, but for the most part, I choose where things go. What you do with all your annuals and plants as you winterize your garden, that's up to you too, and dependent upon your circumstances. One method you could do is just a classic chop and drop, where you come through, chop the plant, and just drop it where it is. Or you can do what Sepp Holzer does. He just leaves everything, allows the snow to come through and cover over top of everything so that the weight of the snow covers the plants, drops them down. And he says when this happens, it allows for more airspace, which gives you a better decomposition. I like to do something a little different though, similar to what Paul Gauci does. So I know I'm gonna have a bad frost tomorrow. I wanna use these tomatoes for what I can. I'm gonna come through and cut this tomato down right at the base, right here, which is so important. You don't wanna pull this out of the ground or you're gonna pull out the roots. Those roots are gonna break down and feed the soil. You wanna leave those. That's good organic matter. All these beautiful tomatoes on here are gonna feed my chickens. I'm gonna bring them over. We'll just call them over and they'll all come running. So these chickens love these little tomatoes in here. What they'll do is they'll come through, they'll pick at the tomatoes they like, the ones they don't want, they'll come through and they'll just scratch everything up. So I threw everything in there. Now the chickens will come through, they'll pick out the tomatoes, eat the ones they want, but then also just spread everything around, speed up the decomposition process, and become my soil manufacturing plant. Now we have the chickens working for us, creating beautiful soil, rather than in the garden, tearing things up and creating more work for us. Most pruning is best when done in winter, around January, February time. But something like right here, I've got fall raspberries, and you could prune these after your last leaf drop. And I've still got some leaves on my plants here, but I know tomorrow it's gonna be 21 degrees, so everything is gonna drop. If I want, I can come through and cut out some of these fall-bearing raspberries down to the ground. And these fall-bearing raspberries, when you cut them, you wanna make sure you cut as low as you can, which is very important. If you don't cut low enough, say you cut right here, you can have this bud right there, and a new shoot will come out of that, and that'll grow a really weak plant. What you want is new shoots coming out of the ground. like right here. So how you winterize your garden will be dependent upon what your goals are for next year. I want to let you know, don't neglect to put the work in today that will benefit you tomorrow. And remember, you can't eat from the tree you don't plant. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share it, ring that notification bell so when we post a video, you can see it right away. See you in the next one.